the
Dungeon
forehead
Doom Hands.
is the trap
Let's
that we're
talk
talking about
lore.
tonight.
A podcast.
That was a while ago. I'm Spencer. This is Chris. We're going to talk about common mistakes for traps while you run them or you play them. And I feel like, Chris, what are some pitfalls that we make, some mistakes we make, common and also non-common, which I can get into, mistakes for traps?
Well, the thing that I find myself doing almost every time I put a trap in front of people is I find a trap or a type of trap and I'm like, all right, where in this hallway or in this room can I do it? All right. And just try and plug random puzzle pieces in, and it always feels like it doesn't fit. And the questions that players have about it, trying to get around it or avoid it or disable it or some way, it always feels that it doesn't feel natural because I haven't planned out all the ways that they could go around this.
I think that you and I have similar issues. As a DM, I find that, I'll have a wire or some leaves on the ground. Let's just take the background, for example. There's some leaves over here, right? And you're walking through the forest, and what am I supposed to do? Do you have the characters roll a perception check every time there's a trap? I don't think so. I think that's a common mistake. I think that you, as a dungeon master, you put the trap in the place and the trigger in the place, and if the guy doesn't trigger it, let it go. I think that's one of the main mistakes. We try to force that trap. Roll me a perception check. Oh, there seems to be something mysterious about the leaves. No, there isn't. Those are leaves. Who planted those leaves? Those leaves were planted by people.
Hidden as it could be.
Right. Like, if I was a hunter laying down some trap, I wouldn't have mysterious leaves. I would have some leaves.
You would make it look natural.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you trigger it, that's when I would say, Chris, go ahead and roll me that dex. Now it also depends on what kind of trap. So sometimes I feel like there's my opinion, one of the ways we get into making a mistake when we run traps is we don't necessarily run. There's a different process per trap, I think. So it's like, if you see a trap, there's a wire. Well, now we're going to get into sleight of hand. Can we, disarm that?
Well,
is it a big area? I don't know.
Let's think about what is a trap. A trap is a hidden obstacle to injure, stop, bar someone from moving from point A to point B.
Right.
That could be a room.
Yep.
That could be a pitfall or something, but it's always supposed to be that surprise.
Right. I think if your character were to see a trap, and he was a hunter, running through a forest, to your point about preventing the thing from happening. Let's just say it was an area, like maybe running a trap has to do with like the area, and maybe that area really is determined, and who's perceptive to the specific trap is the nature guy, or the guy who has a history in rock climbing, or I played a stonemason once upon a time ago. Maybe that guy has a little bit more say to how stones look, or the architecture of the statue when you're pulling the right triggers, and so on and so forth. So maybe instead of worrying about like the dice that you're rolling to keep the players engaged in the storyline, aka the trap, maybe we as dungeon masters ought to know the player character a little bit better. That's my suggestion. So it would be like, you're a you're a bard and your character also comes from the forest. There's a lot of forest things going on. I'm bringing up, but maybe the trap. You're where the character's from, where the character has been, and the things that he's done. So I feel like, let's say Lone Star. Lone Star was the captain of a ship for a while. So if there's a trap on a ship, maybe he has a lower check to make for a particular trap on a ship. Maybe run it like that, where you keep that engagement, because like at some point, the way that I've been running them, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the game when I say, give me a perception check when you're walking down a hallway. Like, now there's a trap. Now everyone is sneaky deaky,
I think you bring up a point of letting the play determine what you reveal.
Right.
So it's like, all right, we're walking down this hallway. What do we see? Then you say rolling perception or whatever. But instead of, I'm going to walk down this hallway, and you look in your book and you see your notes. So, yep, there's 2 traps. All right, let me see if they see these. It's like, gives it away. It's like if the person's like, I'm looking for traps, then you check.
Right.
Well, they're hidden.
If the character says, I want to investigate, then let them investigate. The DM shouldn't be the guy that says, give me a perception check or investigate.
Yeah.
Let the players do that. If they just decide to run in like Matt, best trap I ever ran, trap I ever ran, boom,
I did just clear the previous hallway very methodically.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm just going to go down this random hallway by myself. Hey, sometimes it happens.
Yeah, sometimes it happens, But also, not to get too into it, but like traps are sometimes not necessarily set to keep you away, but sometimes it's necessary to keep something out or back. So there are 2 ways of. So that's a good.
Well, you bring up another great point of the design of the trap. What is the purpose of it?
Right.
A trap for a wizard's or like some hoard of gold or a bank or something is going to be different than a tomb.
Right.
Whereas a tomb doesn't want anyone ever coming in. The bank, there will be ways for someone to access and bypass all of those traps without getting injured every time.
Right. And I feel like the Dungeon Master...
Or the traps face the other way. You have to face them when you leave.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The way that the Dungeon Masters run them, the way that at least I run them, that I feel like is a little bit... Maybe I should change it. I think it just switch. Let the players be the ones who do the initial, I'd like to check this out. Mm-hmm. And then you can sort of tell that story through the investigation. Tell your story through the investigation. These traps, the arrows are pointing that way. Obviously, whoever set this thing up wants to keep you from getting to the other side, right?
Yeah.
And then you can elaborate on that and how to disarm it. Maybe the guy doesn't do it. Roll me a dex save.
Or you trigger the trap, and you get shot in the back.
Right.
And the arrows all shoot towards the direction you're going.
And I think that, like, if you're planning a dungeon map with a bunch of traps, have different traps. Maybe you can say, okay, this hallway is going to have a trap, but depending on how good or I don't know. Maybe I was going to say maybe how good you are at dungeon mastering, but you can change the trap midway. But I think you set the trap. If they trigger it, then they trigger it. If not, you keep it as real life as possible. Mm-hmm. I've probably walked past like a trap in my life and didn't even know that there was one there. Whether it was like
you walked past the open manhole. It's like luckily you thought you saw someone coming. You took that step to the right just the last moment.
Right. Or it's just like someone throws a water balloon and you just happen to walk down the wrong hallway and you get hit by it. Well, that wasn't necessarily a trap, but it's a similar aspect. Roll me a dex save, you fail. I just think that sometimes traps are pushed onto the players as if it is a story. And I think sometimes that's not the good thing. I think that if they make it past the trap, Chris, roll me a perception check. You just realized you guys stepped over a wire and there's a trap. This trap is indicating that there's a mummy past, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And like that's a cool, that's engaging. So there's ways to keep the players engaged by not triggering a trap.
The whole party's waiting at the next intersection. You're lingering back. You look back the other direction and see, clear as day, a trap. Or a sign that says "Turn around." Trap ahead.
And some traps are harder to run than others. I think that the wire traps, anything that's disabling, I think that's cool because, like, okay, guys, who's the disabler guy? Who's going to be, Aaron or Matt used to be the guy. But
also, I think you brought up a point of let the trap be a piece of the story, not the story.
Right.
Let it tell the story of like the types of traps can inform the intelligence of the people inside,
right,
or the design of the facility, or other information, and let that be ways to drop nuggets of foreshadowing.
Right. If the trap is meant to make everyone less HP, if it's meant to like just damage people,
burn resources,
or burn resources, then you can certainly figure out how to do that by just some other way, but don't let the trap hold back the story. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes when you do a trap, it's like now the guys fall in the pit because you forced them to fall in the pit, or like they found the trap or they walked by it and you didn't get to tell the story of it, so now like the next thing seems a little bit out of place. Just tell the story. If they run by it, they run by it. And that's it. I had a dungeon master once. He he set up this whole, and I was playing with Matt, who plays Ignis. Every other Monday, you can zoom in and watch this. He had this whole sand pit sort of laid out and like intricate puzzles with traps and all that stuff. And Matt decided to take that. What's that thing where
the immovable rod?
Yeah. He took the immovable rod and sort of.
It was doing the the Ninja Warrior.
It was hilarious.
All the way across.
Yeah, and then someone else turned into a spider and swung people from the immovable rod across, and that was it. And the Dungeon Master was like, you know what? And this was an experienced Dungeon Master. He was like, I'm giving everyone some XP for that. That was amazing. I spent all week on this room, and you guys got through it in 5 seconds. Like, congratulations. Yeah, and that's a cool reward. It's a cool reward because now, the Dungeon Master has the ad lib because he didn't expect you guys to get out of that fast.
Yeah.
But also, you used your real life like resources to get through it. So like, play it. My recommendation, I guess, would
play
be
it as it lies.
Play it as it lies, but also like, if we were in that dungeon, you're not necessarily gonna trip every trap, or you're gonna or like see everything, or whatever. But I'm assuming that, Chris, if you saw a trap and you got by it, you'd at least give it a once little glance. And
we've said a number of times that players are incredibly creative, no matter what you throw at them.
Oh my god!
So they're gonna think of you as a player. You're gonna think of whatever crazy idea that you can imagine to not take damage, or to avoid this thing that looks scary. That's why you play. That's why you fight.
Yeah.
So to risk something to hopefully survive and not die.
Yes.
As a character.
For sure.
So let that be a trap. Let that 66 go flying in there.
Right.
Unless you see it and can disable it or whatever. Characters are. Death is so hard in 5e.
Right, but also like but the way I and for our podcast, in my perspective, I like to push that player engagement and like I like to have a seamless, everyone's engaged all the time. It's rarely possible, but you can do things that certainly help, and this is one of them. It's like, the traps don't have to cause damage to create player engagement. In fact, in my opinion, when you get stuck in a trap, it disengages a lot of people. And if you run by it and notice it and it tells a story, there's danger ahead, or there's something you missed, or maybe there's something you missed. Maybe, there's this language on the trap that says, don't lift if blah, blah, blah. And then now you have to purposely set it off. Or like the
bridge that says weight limit.
Yeah, or there's a button that says do not push.
Right.
And like there's tons of ways to tell a story, and I think traps is one of them. And I think that telling the story through a trap is one of, if not the most underrated portion of playing a trap. And that is my Let's Talk Lore trap segment. We're going to come back to traps, I'm assuming, at some time in the future. Not necessarily reasonably soon, but if you're going to take anything away, real life, play traps, and players are hard to kill. Because that's, you're not going to do that with a trap unless you're Matt and you just run into a 6d6 and people don't realize it's a 6d6 and they just off D6s. Themselves. Yeah, but
I think he was very much done with Pliskin.
Yeah,
he's like, I nearly died to a beholder. I'm ready to.
He's like,
to find someone new.
I don't want to be a wizard, and he just runs down a hallway. It's obviously littered with traps. I mean, you guys, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, Let's Talk Lore. Hit that button, subscribe. I'm Spencer. This is Chris. We'll be back with more. Hope you learned a little bit about traps. Use that in your next session. Peace.
This is Rena. Rena rolled low during death saves and didn't get healed by his group. Don't be a Rena. Roll high and subscribe.